vibrer, ça fait danser. Oh Africa, ça fait rêver, ça fait vibrer, ça fait danser. Oh Africa, Bariula Baragaya Visa Sorona, Bakewalaye, Yewala Malilela, La Guinée, le Gabon, Sénégal, le Bénin, Yaoundé, oh quel beau pays, Africa, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Africa, 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 eh.
Oh, Africa, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Africa, 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 eh.
Oh, Africa, oh yeah, oh, oh, oh.
Africa, 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 eh.
Welcome to the very first Africa-Based Leadership Academy Masterclass. My name is Thebe Ikalafeng, and I am your host today. And with me in studio today, we've got, we're in studio across the African universe. I've got my good friends, Laduma Ngxokolo, from the founder and creative director of Maxhosa here in South Africa. And I've got all the way in Nigeria, I've got my good friend, Tunde Owolabi. He's the founder and creative director of Ethnik in Nigeria. I also have my other good friend, Moses Turahirwa from Moshions in Rwanda. But Moses is with us all the way from Italy. So we've got quite a global panelist here. Before I even go too far with the conversation, I've been looking at some of the messages that I've been receiving on the social media. They said, why do you only have men on the panel? So everybody's been giving me the grief about the men. I don't think I actually went for the men on the panel. I actually just wanted a Pan-African representation. I wanted the three corners, if you will, East Africa, West Africa, and Southern Africa. And I said to start, who do I know in South Africa who is the leading voice of culturally inspired African work? And Laduma's name came to mind. I'm sure there's many others. I similarly went to East Africa and saying that region, who do I know? And Moses' name came to mind because I know Moses obviously, and I know Laduma, and I also know Tunde in Nigeria. So I promise next time around we are going to expand this and make sure that we include women, or rather I'm more conscious about it, but it was an unconscious, unintended bias in this regard. But I'm excited I'm excited for us to have this very first masterclass by ABLA. And particularly on one of the most important subjects that's going to define and distinguish ABLA over the years, which is our work at ABLA is going to be culturally inspired, is going to reflect an understanding and an innate relationship with the continent, that is our continent, Africa. The most magnificent continent, which is beginning to inspire the world over in terms of creativity and many other innovations. But what really struck me on why we need to start with this is I looked at the creative economy, the creative industry worldwide, and said, what is the problem or the challenge that we have right now? And the first thing that comes to mind is Africa represents less than 1% of the global creative economy. So if you look at this economy of $2.2 trillion, we are only representing 1%. I know, and I'm sure everybody else around the world knows, it is not what we represent, it's not what we contribute, because we're going to talk about some of that contribution in a minute when we get to it. I know that we represent a whole lot more than that around the world. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about culture, a little bit about about how we're beginning to see a renaissance, or if you will, an appreciation and a growth in African culture being infused into the creativity or that comes out of this continent. And people are using culture for many reasons. One, it's the one thing that I think distinguishes us around the world. Every continent, every country has got its own culture, but I think here in the continent, we are really renowned for our vibrancy, the vibrancy of our culture. But secondarily, I think people are using it as a sense of pride, as a sense of identity, or a mark of pride and a mark of identity. So that's what we're going to speak a lot about. A lot of papers have been written about this. A lot of research has been done about culture, about the creative economy. I'm hoping that today we're going to have an interesting and exciting discussion around that. We're joined by quite a few people from around the continent. We're streaming live from our studios in Johannesburg, and we're speaking to my good friends Laduma Ngxokolo, Turahirwa, and Tunde Owolabi from around the continent. So without wasting too much time and perhaps getting onto that, I probably will start with a 1-minute introduction to everybody, and my connection really with each one of them. I will start furthest north of the continent, which is West Africa, and I'll start with my friend Tunde. Tunde, please, can you introduce yourself? I mean, I know you, and I know some of the work that you do. A lot of people probably have seen the ethnic brand. Ladies taking the world by storm, from your sneakers, your bags, and all that. Photographer, you're a creative director. I also think you're a bit of a copywriter, because I see when I follow your work on Instagram, I say, my brother here can speak put together some good English words which make sense here to go with this incredible work. Tunde Owolabi, perhaps just a minute introduction as to what you do and what distinguishes your work. Tunde.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tunde. Thank you, Thebe. Hello, Laduma. Hi, Moses. Nice to meet you. My name is Tunde. I am the creative director for Ethnik.Afrika. I like to refer to myself as an artist because that gives me the freedom to be whatever I want to be. I wouldn't say I'm a fashion designer or just a designer. I would say I'm an artist because, as an artist, you have the liberty to conceive any idea and be able to interpret them in whatever media you want. So I like to introduce myself as Tunde Owolabi, creative director for Ethnik, and I'm an artist.
Thank you, Tunde. And I can see right behind you is one of your works, one of your paintings, because you also paint, and also paint.
Yes.
I want to go furthest, then I want to go into the middle of the continent, East Africa, or to the middle right of the continent, East Africa, but right now, all the way from Italy, my good friend Moses. Moses, introduce yourself to those who don't know really how you define yourself and your type of work.
Great, yeah. Thank you, Thebe, for having me, and thank you, everyone, Laduma and Tunde. So my name is Moses Turahirwa. I'm from Rwanda. I'm the creative director of Moshions. Moshions is a fashion brand, culture inspired, that's fusing modernity and the cultural frameworks. And we are bridging the present to the future to create what we can call the future heritage. Yeah, I'm currently doing my studies in Italy, still in fashion design, and I'm doing the master in collection design at Polymoda for the moment.
Moses, what's interesting is you didn't study as a designer. You were a model at one stage, but what did you study again in college?
I did civil engineering, surprisingly, but very enthusiastic of fashion.
And we're grateful that welcome Moses. And then all the way down to South Africa, my good friend and brother, Laduma Ngxokolo. Laduma, please, for those who don't know you, tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do. Laduma?
He's muted.
He's muted, actually.
Laduma? Laduma,
Greetings,
is
Mr. T. Greetings, Mr. T. I can't get used to his Zoom calls. Greetings to you, Tunde, and greetings to you, Moses and Pet Mahlangu. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I am Laduma Ngxokolo, born and raised in Port Elizabeth, and I'd like to call myself a designer. I work in the fashion design space and interior and deco design space. Those are the two things that I'm passionate about. But I also do specialize in textile engineering, which is what I studied at school, but had a great passion for fashion design. Thank you.
Thank you, Laduma. Yeah, I mean, I think what's so interesting about what we're seeing about with our creative people is just how you guys have expanded beyond what quote unquote people would have, how you have been introduced to the world. I mean, you Laduma, you do homeware, you do homeware. I mean, from wallpaper to rugs to cushions. And your portfolio has really expanded, and we'll talk about some of the exciting things that all of you are doing out there. So to start, I want to just to hone in into what really inspired you, all of you, to get into this space. So I'm going to start with Moses. I met Moses. I don't know how many years ago, many years ago, and I was quite intrigued about how he infuses Rwandan culture, the beadwork, which is quite a coincidence between South Africa and Rwanda. We'll get to that as well. But what inspired you to look at your culture and say, this is a source of inspiration for me? Moses, what was that awakening? I mean, or had you always done this? Moses?
Yeah.
While Moses is getting sorted, I think Moses.
You hear me?
No, we can't hear you. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. Let's cross over to Tunde. Tunde, you use the Yoruba culture as your inspiration. How did it all start? I mean, when did you say this is what I'm going to be doing?
Thank you. I think it started in 2012 when I decided to leave my day job as an art director in advertising. I always knew that I wanted to create products, but I wasn't sure. You know, I wanted to be. I wanted to create things. I wanted to design products. I wanted to design experiences, but I wasn't sure what it was going to be. And you know, as part of my training, even though I studied graphic design, part of my training was being a painter. You know, so I left advertising with the aim of exploring. I traveled around Nigeria a bit, learning about the culture, learning about the people, learning about the food. And I think by the time I was done traveling around the country and a few other African countries, I came to the resolution that I wanted to create something that is African inspired. So what it was going to be. So in 2013, I was doing a research on female ways of dressing in Africa with the turban, you know, the gele, the head tie, the different kind of head tie. And that was supposed to be my exhibition, my art exhibition. I wanted to create images, I wanted to create paintings and, you know, do some photography. I still did, but what struck me was for all the images that I was searching for on the internet, Ashoke came up a lot. And you know, I started to ask questions. What exactly is it about this fabric? And you know, images of weddings, you know, very elaborate dressing with the women with the very sky-high gele, you know, the guys with the agbada, very regal, you know. So I thought, I think this fabric is what I want to study instead of working on or doing the research on just traditional head style. So for me, I thought the best way to learn about it was to go to where the fabric is being done. So I asked questions. I asked my mom, you know, I had to go dig out some of my mom's old fabric, you know, just to learn about the fabric. And then went into the hinterlands where the fabric is made. And that kind of, you know, just sealed it for me that, you know what, this fabric, I need to bring this fabric to life. There's more to this fabric than just the ceremonial purposes that it's used for. And you know, so I did a research, I did a documentary on the fabric. I painted some images, you know, took some photos, and I had an exhibition about the fabric in 2014. So after the exhibition, I sat down and I was asking myself the question, what next? You know, how can we make this more sustainable? How can this fabric be brought to life? You know, how can we make it cool for the young people? Because asking questions amongst the young people, you know, they tell you, Ashoke, why would I wear Ashoke? It's too heavy, you know, it's not cool, it's not this. So I thought there must be a way to make this fabric appeal to every other person, you know, younger people and all that. And I thought sneakers, you know, I thought about sneakers, and that was where it started from. So I made my first pair of sneakers, and since then, you know, we've made thousands.
So from you, it was curiosity and a bit of appreciation. Moses back online. So maybe we go to Moses and try and understand the Rwandan. I mean, he's Rwandan, but how he looked into the Rwandan culture and says, here's a source of inspiration. Moses, are we able to get you back?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, wonderful. All right. Thank you again. I was saying that I'm a very good observer, and then when I grew up, I was really passionate about fashion, what being created, but always every time I could look into fashion and the clothing, I was referring so much about the West, the cuts, the suits, and tailoring. But I wanted, when I started in 2015, I wanted to be able to claim my own fashion. So I think I looked so much about the cultural implication of what I could do, and how do I not have the Western culture influence so much, even if we learn from them. I know fashion cities like Paris and Rome, Milan, but how do we claim our own fashion? So I thought the only way that I could use is the implication of my culture frameworks into the cuts. So I started to do the research about fabrics, the cutting, the tailoring, and see how I could combine or fuse my cultural aesthetics into that to kind of be able to create the modernity or contemporary styles. So that's how we started. I gave it a try. I was so much referred into the artisan work of Rwanda. In Rwanda, there's so much artisans, there is so much rich culture in artisan and craftsmanship. So I referred to that and started to experiment the beadwork, the hand embroidery, the patterns, the the prints, mostly what you know about, like the geometric prints and patterns, what we call imigongo, and started to put together everything, kind of create my mood board from that. So I started fusing the Western couture style and the traditional aesthetics. So, and then I gave it an experiment and started to work with my team, my tailor, and see how we can fuse both. And I think when we started, it was quite an adventurous approach, but it was quite well received, and people started to see themselves in it because there was that implication of the culture. And I think I also wanted to see what can play the pivotal role in relationship between me as a designer and the consumer. And I wanted that people of Africa or people of Rwanda see themselves in what I could create. And so the implication was quite a breakthrough to get the consumer to have this attention to us.
And then the beadwork, is that very much Rwandan? Because when we segue to Laduma, I want to talk about the beadwork as well. So a lot of your work has got the beadwork. I mean, Imigong, so you use a bit of Imigong and all those aesthetic, but I see a lot of beadwork in much of the stuff that you do.
Yeah, I think the beadwork is everywhere. I think it's also something we share with other African countries. A lot I've seen in Kenya, in South Africa, but also it is a good way for me to translate my creations, as I talked about the imigongo and what we call amabara, or the Rwandan weaving and motifs. So we're mostly in the painting or using the natural soil and the cow dung to create these panels. But the bead embroidery and the other types of embroidery was so much inspiring to translate my idea into and bring it to life. So I think that's one of the thing we share with other African countries, of course, and also the patterns. I see them a lot in South Africa, Kenya, in Rwanda. So I think there is still a link between African nations as the cultural symbols that we share, but the use can be also different. We can use them as creatives in different many ways.
Got it. So now we'll segue to Laduma. I mean, your work is incredibly groundbreaking. It's everywhere in the world. I think on the 5th of this month, which is March, we are coming to America, will break worldwide, will open worldwide. And Eddie Murphy, Nom Zamo, and a whole lot of other people are wearing Maxhosa. What inspired you to, in your days at university, to say, I need to use my culture? Because you went even further deep into the culture, because you went into an area which is, one could say, sacred, the tradition, the circumcision tradition, because you went and borrowed from that part. And it's sort of an insight into a very personal part of a culture. What inspired you to switch, to use that as an inspiration?
Thank you, Mr. T. On my side, what inspired me to focus on culture as a design source of inspiration was, as you mentioned, a project that I did as a thesis project at the Nelson Mandela University in 2010. And back at that time, I just finished my initiation as a Xhosa initiate. But as a person who has been growing up in a home where my late mother was super patriotic about culture, she literally read anthropology books to us on a daily basis. So culture became something that was familiar with us. We grew up making curio products for curio stores around Port Elizabeth. And at that time, the feeling that I got as a person that studied textile design in high school, and as a person that started hand machine knitting when I was 15 years old, I felt like with the knowledge that I had as a person that appreciated fashion, I felt like the clothes that we wore as Xhosa initiates was not cultural enough. They felt more English, like the hunter caps and the English jackets and the loafers that we wore didn't really resemble or celebrate our culture. In fact, those type of clothes were a form of being accepted in a colonial territories in the Eastern Cape, where people plowed, where they had jobs to plow vegetables and fruits. So for me, I wanted to change and reverse that history and get Xhosa initiates to be able to celebrate their own culture, but in a modern context. It was also a taste type of choice because I personally loved Italian fashion. I personally loved French fashion, specifically luxury fashion. And so I decided that with the resources that we apparently had in Port Elizabeth, that is the wool industry, that is the biggest in the continent, and the mohair industry that we have as the biggest in the world, I wanted to take those raw materials and create something that is unique out of them. Of course, I had to look for a source of inspiration. And for me, it was a no-brainer to go for beadwork that the Xhosa people started doing in the 1800s. And fortunately, there already had been a lot of archives that were available in museums. So I went to museums and researched and realized that I'm part of a clan that created different aesthetics in terms of the style of beadwork. So with the information that was there, I realized that there was plus minus over 200 clans, different clans, and each clan had their own styles. So therefore, I saw an opportunity to establish a brand that is based on this aesthetic, but can resemble what other cultures in Africa have come up with as an idea of a beadwork, colors, patterns, and shapes. I then decided that culture will be the base of the brand. And when I traveled to the UK for the first time in 2010, I also realized as well that the African diaspora, or the luxury industry and the fashion industry in general, didn't have any brands that were aspirational, luxury brands that were aspirational for Black people or whoever to purchase as an alternative. The choices that were there were either Asian or Indian or American or European. I felt like this was a time now to actually experiment with our own aesthetic and pitch it to the world and just care what they think.
Thank you, Laduma, for that introduction, and congratulations again for having your work being featured so prominently in the upcoming Coming to America movie with Eddie Murphy and many of our leading actors around the world. I want to actually, while you're there, now that everybody got a context in terms of how you all started, whether it is a curiosity, whether it is research, whether it's all those, all of you not same, are very invested in our culture. And all of you seem to have all of you came from your own culture. So you didn't go to anybody else's culture. I mean, you, Laduma from Maxhosa, Tunde from the Yoruba tribe, and then Moses from the brother Rwandan culture. Is it possible, by the way, is it possible to appropriate your own culture? And I'll give you an example, and why I'm asking the question. So when a young man, Richard is one of the successful designers from South Africa. When he decided to launch Shibelani, the Tsonga traditional dress, and pitched it at $3,000 for sale, everybody started saying he is, or not everybody, somebody said to me on Instagram, says he is appropriating our culture. We are used to getting that culture for cheap, for 300 rand or for $10-15. Now he wants to charge us so much money. We don't accept it. Is it possible to appropriate your own culture? I don't know. Tunde, let's start with you. Is it possible to appropriate your own culture?
Well, no, because first off, it's not, you can't really place value to it. You know, you're looking at the culture and you have taken the culture to refine it, to create something that every other person did not see from that culture. You have taken the culture, it's like taking coffee beans and making it into coffee. And then, you know, you've given it to different brands and you have the Nespresso and the rest. That's the way I see it. You can't say because it's our culture, then it's supposed to be cheap. Because even back then, it was not cheap. I remember when I was doing my research on Ashoke, you know, I was talking to some of the elderly people that used to weave the fabric. And they said to me, for you to get married in the olden days, you needed to have Ashoke. If you don't have it, you have to go and look for someone who's got it, probably work for the person to hire their own for you to wear. If you are going to become a chief, you must own Ashoke for you to be able to be ordained as a chief. So the fact that you see it everywhere doesn't make it cheap. There are different levels to these things, you know. So I don't see it as being appropriated.
So from your end, Laduma, because of the three of them, you really went deep. You really went deep into the culture. Do you feel that you appropriate or exploited something that is so sacred about your culture? And I don't have a view on it. I'm just out of interest.
Is that for me? Are you referring to me, Mr. T?
Yes, because you went so deep into the culture. Because, you know, everybody went to the culture broadly as known. You went one level down, one level deep, no, not down, one level deep, and you brought that to the public. Do you feel like you have exposed the culture or taken something that belongs to everybody and now you've quote unquote commercialized it for yourself?
For me, to come back to the general question that is you asked whether it's possible to appropriate culture, my opinion is yes, it is possible to appropriate your own culture. I see it in a sense that I could have made the wrong decisions about my own culture and my own people would have been angry at me. Like, for instance, I would have, imagine if I took the production value chain of Maxhosa and outsourced it all from China. My people would have looked at me differently as a capitalist. But then I chose to struggle instead. Yes, there were big commercial opportunities of manufacturing the clothes elsewhere and letting other people make decisions on my behalf or sell 80% of my business to an investor that will make the final calls at the end of the day that are commercially based. But I chose as part of my policies of my company that I want to be relevant to the culture first, that is the Xhosa people. I wanna be relevant in terms of my own country's economy. I wanna be relevant in the education element. Like for instance, my work gets featured in high school, primary and university education. So the positivity that I wanted to bring was that I want to be part of a new system of unlearning that culture is less than any other culture in the world. Those were the positives that I wanted to contribute within the culture. I'd like to believe that I made the culture better. I exposed it even more because still a lot of people are learning how to pronounce Maxhosa properly. And offshore markets that we've explored as well didn't really know about the Xhosa culture, but they knew about Nelson Mandela, but they didn't know where to position him within the South African cultural context. So yeah, to conclude on your question, Mr. T, I think it is possible to appropriate your own culture. There is also an element that ultimately a designer has to, that I felt that I had to do, was to go and consult with Monarchy. I got an opportunity to actually meet the Xhosa king, King Zwelonke himself, and gifted him a piece just to hear his opinion. I've met other kings as well of other clans of the Xhosa speaking nation people, and they love it. There hasn't been any negative feedback. Ultimately, I'd love to have a handcraft facility within the Eastern Cape where people can produce like items of value that are even more valuable than what I already do as Maxhosa.
Absolutely love that perspective. And I want to ask Moses the same question, but I'm going to put a spin to it. Moses, I've seen the president of Rwanda wears your clothing now, well, among many other people around the world wearing your clothing. And Laduma said something interesting. He said it's about education as well. Not many people know about Rwanda, the many parts of Rwanda, other than the fact that it's obviously one of the fastest rising economies, one of the well-run countries in the last 20, 25 years. But I think through you, do you feel like you are not appropriating it? You are perhaps educating people a lot more about the culture of Rwanda?
Yeah, thank you, Thebe. I think on my end, as really when we looked at the concept of the culture and appropriating the culture, I think people always get misunderstood or hard, because I think for the culture, it's what are we doing with the culture? How are we adding the value to the culture to create? So it is an implication that has to come with recreating or adding value to the culture. And I don't see that as appropriating the culture, because this is something we are part of, that we really feel like we belong to. And as I said, we have to, our fashion, if I go so much into the fashion and creating, it only has to rely to this, our fashion language has to relate to this cultural symbols. So it's our task, it's our, in our capacity to be able to translate it however we want, referring to that. We are artists, we are free people, I mean fashion designers and creators. And so we have to use the culture, of course, in a good way, depending on also how you structure your business or how you want your brand to be seen. But I don't think it is possible to appropriate it, but on my end, I don't think I appropriate the culture. And I think I just add the value and recreate and kind of harmonize the cultural symbols and the aesthetics to bring it to the world and to the people that I serve.
And yeah, and it's education. I love that both those comments in terms of what infusing that culture does in terms of taking it out into the world. So linked a little bit to that, and I want to go to Laduma. It's with this movement, the movie coming out on the 5th. We see obviously there's going to be an excitement around seeing African creativity or fashion or talent as well, because it's talent in both ways, both acting talent as well as crafts talent with the work Laduma we're going to see in that. We are seeing the development of the world wearing the rituals. We're seeing a range of people around the world wearing all three of the world. Laduma, do you think this is a fad? Is it a fashion or fad? Is it going to pass? Or do you think we are here to stay? I don't know. I'm worried whether now we are the latest, greatest until some other continent comes up with something else.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mr. T. Actually, when I used to live in London, like I used to talk to a few showrooms. Showrooms are meant to distribute products for me to boutiques around their territory. So one of the opinions, it was actually a popular opinion in the fashion industry at that time that the African aesthetic was a trend for that season. I think it was 2016. And I used to tell all of them that I beg to differ. Culture cannot be a trend. If that's the case, then French culture or Italian culture will be a trend. But I think this whole wave is, of course, dependent on how certain brands position their entities. Yes, there is a big hype, but what I would ask myself is the hype based on us, African people, being involved in a value chain. If we are not, then that hype will come in and out, because what would then mean is that we are not decision makers in the fashion industry. We will still remain the 1% of the whole value chain. But if we get to go as far as getting involved in retail, there's a brand that opened up a boutique last year in New York called Daily Paper, of which was a huge statement for them to make. The three guys are from Africa, Ghana, one is from Ghana, and other one is from, I think, Ethiopia. They made a bold statement and opened up in New York. Then it means that they are not a trend at all. They are an alternative brand. So people could either buy Prior Moss or buy Alexandra Waring or DKNY or CK in New York, basically. But nevertheless, not even looking outside the continent, we've got a growing middle class that is growing faster than our consciousness. And that is a market that is set for us. And it is a market that is a first priority to my market as well. A lot of people often think that Maxhosa is targeted for overseas markets, but they get surprised when we tell them that 90% of our market is actually South Africans and people from neighboring countries as well.
So Moses, who's buying your stuff? Who's buying your clothes, your designs? Just building on Laduma's comment, is it Rwandese, Africans, broadly, or is it mostly export?
Great. I think we haven't really been exporting as much. I think our market definitely is based 70%, 75% of Rwandans, and then 15% of Africans living in African countries or diaspora. And we have a very small percentage of clients who are from like the West, who probably buy online, but the biggest market we have is Rwandans. So it's always Sorry?
Why are they buying your stuff?
Why?
So what is what's the inspiration for them? What's the motivation for them? Are they buying it because it's Rwandan culture, or because it is fashionable, or because it's the latest thing that everybody's doing? So really building arguments though?
Great. I think it's both. It's both, as I said, because they see themselves in the creations. They see themselves in what we create because it has these cultural symbols, the cultural aesthetic on it. But they buy it also because it's beautiful and it's close to them. I think it's not like in the 50s, people used to travel to go to Paris to buy their fashion, their fashion pieces. Now it's also about how do they support the local brands and the brand that's near you that's doing amazing work. So it has to be involved on what is the quality, the beautiful work that you are doing, and also the fact that they see themselves in what you're creating, and that's where the cultural implication kind of manifests, because they see themselves in what we're creating. But also I'll talk a little bit about also how the fashion industry generally is being redefined, and where we talk about is it going to be sustainable, this attention maybe to the African brands or to the African culturally inspired brands. I think there is a huge fashion scene, and as we saw how the fashion been revamping and getting redefined, there is always the evolution of fashion from countries where it started from France, then Italy came in, UK, United States, and then I think it is not a bad thing that it could be the time for Africa to kind of claim its role, its force, because we have a huge drive also generating from the culture that need to be celebrated, that needs to be seen. So the question will probably come after: how do we maintain this? How do we maintain that Africa's claimed role in the fashion industry can be sustained? It needs to be sustained. It will come on how we start to study and look beyond on how do we keep this, how do we keep it up there. So I think there is a lot to manifest. There is a lot also to explore, and it's up to us to be also more creative and create and be able to prove to people that we can do it. Also not referring far from the culture and how we imply everything, because there is an emergency, and then we have to be to stand out as a creative force, a new creative force that kind of emerge in the African, in the fashion industry in general.
Thanks. Thank you so much for that, Moses. Tunde, Nigeria has probably got the largest diaspora anywhere in the world. So, is it Nigerians in Nigeria who buy your stuff, or is it the diaspora who are buying your things? Who's buying your stuff?
It's mostly Nigerians in Nigeria, and so because the Nigerians in Nigeria have bought them and introduced them to the ones in diaspora, it has now become something that those in diaspora also want to be a part of. It's them trying to, or rather them wanting to be, for lack of a better way of putting it, they're trying to represent their culture, trying to go back to their roots and being identified with where they're from, with their culture and all that. So it's mostly about 75% Nigerian, and then the rest, the rest of the world, basically.
I think what's so beautiful about this conversation and understanding is that it's our own people supporting us, and to me that's where perhaps we ought to be headed as a start. Because if we don't appreciate where we come from, it's going to be very difficult for us to get anybody else to appreciate. Of course, a lot of people do appreciate what we do, sometimes in ways that we don't like. Today, how did the Nigerians react when Jamie Oliver made jollof?
I mean, it's just the same way we react to Ghana when Ghana made jollof.
Jollof is a favorite output of Muslims in Nigeria, of Ghana. What did you feel?
Because Nigerians believe that if jollof, sorry, I didn't hear that.
Did you feel like somebody is taking away something of the country?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there were different opinions, you know. But the main thing is, this is not our jollof. This is not what our jollof looks like, you know. Some people feel like they're trying to recreate it in their own way, which in itself is, you know, it's not a bad idea. But Nigerians just believe if it's not Nigerian jollof, it is not jollof. You know?
So if it's not made by the Nigerians, it's not jollof.
It's not jollof.
So Laduma, I mean, we've had lots of controversies, even in South Africa, with people taking our ideas, our ideas and recreating them in some way. How did you feel when one of the leading brands copied your socks? I mean, it's a global brand, and they took your sock idea and reproduced it. Perhaps it created a lot of controversy around here. How did you feel? Did you feel that you've been robbed, or did you feel that you've been what you've done has been so appreciated, everybody wants to share in it?
Yeah. Yeah, I of course felt robbed because number one, I didn't benefit any profits from it. Number two, I wasn't consulted for it. It became a surprise that I got from customers. And people thought that it was legit. Some people thought it was a legit collaboration because the design was exactly the same. So for me, those type of gestures, I see them as misappropriation and rather not a form of flattery. As people say, being copied is a form of flattery. I don't believe in that at all, but and some people say that if you've been copied, it means that you are making it. From my thoughts, you know, I thought that Zara probably thought that I'm a very small brand that is starting out. I'm a startup that is still trying to make it in the industry, and therefore no one would notice. But yeah, nevertheless, being copied is something that I get at least every 6 months, and people still prefer to buy from our brand directly because of the quality and the name that we've upheld for the past 10 years. And as Tunde said, if it's not cooked in Nigeria, it's not jollof. And the French also believe the same thing. If it wasn't brewed and bottled in France, it's not champagne. And therefore, brands should be that possessive about their belongings and try to build that DNA that will make people insist on buying the original.
Laduma, I'm going to steal that. That's going to be my new line now. If it's not cooked in Nigeria, it's not jollof. If it's not brewed and bottled in France, it's not champagne. So I love that. It's going to be my new line that I'm going to be using whenever I talk about this. So I want to get back to the concept of value now, and I will go back to the earlier conversation I brought up about Rachel Mrs. Shivelan, and I think you guys started talking a little bit about it, but I just want to get a little bit to this discussion. When, and I'll use perhaps not, it's not a culturally inspired idea, but when Tepo jeans decided to sell his jeans at $5.90, South Africans were very, very upset. They said they can get the same jean for 500 or what, $30 from Markhams. They were not interested in buying this. But as soon as Meghan Markle came to South Africa and bought the same jeans and bought the jeans for herself and for Prince Archie, all of a sudden there was a rush towards getting turbo jeans, and they were prepared at this time to buy them for 3 to 4 times the price. Do you feel that there's an underappreciation of the value of anything that is created by Africans, especially when you go back to the comment of Richie Mrs. Shibelani, where people then begin to think, especially if it comes from our culture, nobody has the right to put a higher price because they can get it cheaper. Laduma, by all accounts, you are not cheap. You are known to be a premium brand, and you have no interest in being an entry-level brand. You see yourself as a premium brand alongside the Hermeses or the Moshions, particularly when it comes to network. Neither are you, Moses, and neither are you, Tunde, because I wear all your clothes. So I know for certain you guys, we cannot find you guys in a flea market, and we cannot find you for less price. Do you think there's an underappreciation or an undervaluation of African of made in Africa? Let me start with Moses. Moses, have you received a lot of resistance to your pricing?
Yes, thanks, Thebe. I've received a lot, and I think this is something we are now used to, I think. But in Kinyarwanda, we say there is a proverb that says, "Uwamba ikirezi ntamenya ko cyera." Ikirezi is like a pearl. It's a beautiful pearl that's in the tradition. So whenever you're wearing that pearl, you think it's common, or you think anyone can get it, and you do not recognize how white it must be unless someone sees it on you. So that's the kind of translation. So I always tell people, because you do not have to wait for someone overseas to appreciate our work. The work that you have near you, so that you can be able, or so that you can be convinced to buy it, or to make sure that it's worth it. So I think it is in the mindset that needs to change, that even if you can easily see it, even if I am your neighbor, even if we grew up together, you have to see that ability of transforming and the work that is involved to create something. So I always get this comment on Twitter, or a lot of on social media, it is Rwandan, it should not cost this. But we don't have the government setting the prices for the brands, and involving the creative work and the craftsmanship and everything. There is so much energy that needs to be valued, that is put into the work that we do. So much energy, so much work, and then I feel like it will be so much pleasing. It will be so, creatives will always be grateful to have the appreciations coming from their own people first. So I think this is something we need to encourage, and it's really common that we get that. It's the matter of mindset that needs to change.
Laduma, do we need to bring down the prices of Maxhosa, or you are where you ought to be, and we need to come up to where you are?
So,
my prices can only get higher. I believe that the subject of value versus price is a negotiation space that brands should have with customers. And I wouldn't even dare put the blame on our people for complaining about prices, because the three of us are in the business of exchanging value for resources. When I say so, I mean that with pricing comments, people think of three things. They think of the aspiration behind it, that we have to create with marketing. They think of the quality, on how long it's gonna last them, and they think of the feedback that they're gonna get from people on how beautiful it is and whatnot. For me, there has been customers that would come up and say that, oh, that's a garment with patterns, I'll get someone else to do it for me. And then they walk off, get someone to do it for them, and then that person promises them a lion and then present a cat to them. You know, so that is when customers understand value, when they've faced a difficulty to actually reach the aspiration that I have promised them. As you always say, Mr. T, a promise made is a promise delivered. And unfortunately, in the space that we operate in, we get victimized by the track record that other brands have promised the people and disappointed them in the past. Now we have to be guinea pigs of that and actually show people ×3 or ×5 that we will give you something that is more than the value of the price that you're gonna pay us for our piece.
I absolutely appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I mean, I know your brand, I know Moses' brand, I know Tunde's brand. You guys have never ever disappointed. You always delivered on your promise. Tunde, Nigeria is quite a wealthy country. People pay in dollars. They walk around in proper dollars. So I don't think you have problems about how much you charge in dollars. Matter of fact, your prices are in dollars.
I mean, well, they come to realize that it's not about just the price. It's about the value that you're giving. And like Laduma said, you know, we're like the guinea pig for some of the brands that have overpromised but under-delivered in the past. But right now, it's amazing to see that a lot of people are beginning to see the value and how things can be done in Africa, you know. So now the appreciation is a lot, and people are willing to pay, you know, whatever price that, you know, you're commanding. Even though some still say, oh, it's not Gucci, it's not this, but you know, you end up saying to them, you can either go buy the Gucci or you can buy this. It's not going to reduce my price because I'm not reducing the quality and I'm not reducing the value that I'm giving to you. You know? So it's, I think we just need to continue to educate people about how things are done and you know, let your value proposition, let the quality of what you're giving speak for itself. I believe, you know, with Laduma, with Moses, you know, I believe what we produce actually speak for themselves. Because for someone like me, I hardly do a lot of marketing, but when people see the product, they're willing to, you know, they ask, where did you get this? And they're willing to, you know, put their money down to get one for themselves. And like Laduma said, it's an aspirational brand. You know, people look at it and some even say, oh, I like this, but I need to save towards it. And, you know, it's like what this guy said, Tom Ford, you know, we're in the business of creating desires. So we create this desire and, you know, people come for it and they're willing to pay whatever you're charging. So we haven't really had a lot of problem with pricing, you know.
Moses spoke earlier about the government is not putting prices or value on things, but recently a question about the support. How important has it been for any of you, for all of you, to receive, and if you have at all, support from government or cultural institutions run by government? Because I think you're doing an important work for the continent, for the country. You're promoting the culture. You are creating an appreciation of the culture by the locals themselves. You are And you are just telling the story of who we are in the most elegant and the most exquisite way in the world. Laduma, how, other than just sending a tweet as governments tend to do whenever you receive an award, or any of you receive an award, or any of you are appreciated elsewhere in the world, we'll then see ministers and other government officials send out tweets congratulating you. Other than those congratulations, how have they supported this important cultural work that you are doing? Laduma, let's start with you. Or have they at all? But maybe you can also answer whether it's even necessary or important, or whether you care about it.
I think it's very necessary, Mr. T. You in that space, you would understand the magnitude of having a big muscle behind you. I mean, the fashion business is worth $2 trillion, and the market share that we simply ask is a very small percentage of that $2 trillion. And to unlock some of those opportunities, we need resources from the government, the most powerful being cash injection. But if there isn't, you can appreciate being given resources to fly to territories and explore and research, or to fly to other territories to go and do sales or go for marketing avenues. But the cash injection priority hasn't been delegated much by our own government. We hope that it will be better in the future. I haven't benefited from a direct cash injection, but trade shows and fashion shows and other marketing missions that are for overseas markets and even local ones, like but back in the day, I've taken advantage of those opportunities. They don't call you to come and apply. It's a voluntary service that you have to literally walk in and out of those offices of the government and tolerate being mistreated or being undermined, and be patient with it. So I've been patient with all of those support systems that the government has had. But of course, I know very well that South Africa has those funds available, but for well-established businesses, then that are turning over millions of dollars that want to scale up heavily.
Interesting. I mean, I was quite intrigued by the choice of words, that you have to be patient, that you have to tolerate being mistreated, and but eventually, you know, hopefully they help. Moses, what is your thoughts around the role of government and how they treated you in this space?
Thank you, Thebe. I think for the Rwandan government is really supportive. I'll come back to finance injection later on, but I think there has been a lot of initiatives that helps creatives, not only in fashion but also in a core creative industry. There has been what we call a Made in Rwanda campaign, which is a huge campaign initiated by the government, the Ministry of Trade Affairs. So with this initiative, I think brands, locally manufacturing brands, being able to succeed by the awareness, making their awareness through these campaigns of Made in Rwanda, because there was a push. This is something I really appreciate from the Rwandan government. There's a push and a huge campaign around the Rwandan people to support or consume local products. So even if it's not like a direct injection into my, a direct money injection into my business, but it's a huge platform of awareness for people to know what I am creating as a brand and being able to consume my products. So I feel like that relationship between me as a creative designer or a producer to a consumer being much enhanced by one of these Made in Rwanda campaign. This is something I think the Rwandan government been able to achieve, and also bringing so much like trade fairs and supporting some of the creatives who are doing amazing things to unlock their potential in terms of capacity building, sending to trainings or schools. I think it's something that contributing positively to the creative industry. And when we speak about the creative industry, the fashion industry comes among the tops. So this is something I think the Rwandan government has been able to achieve, that's been very beneficial to local brands.
I've seen it and appreciate it as well about the government of Rwanda. I haven't been in many times myself. So Tunde, from your end, Tunde, what are your thoughts on this space? Is it necessary?
I mean, it would be nice to have, like Laduma said, to have some muscle behind you, you know, especially not just the financial side of things. Yes, the finance is very important because we need the money to, you know, to grow. But, you know, we also need policies. We also need to be able to trade, you know, inter-African trade, you know, being able to export what we do to other parts of the world so that we can earn the hard, you know, the foreign currency. But unfortunately, like I'll speak for Ethnic because it's been bootstrapping all the way. You know, every cent we have had to, you know, work for by ourselves and do everything by ourselves without the government putting any help. You know, so if we are able to get that kind of support, imagine what we would do if we had that kind of muscles behind us. But yeah, you know, we're still here, still trying to do what we can in the absence of this support. And hopefully one day, you know, they will come knocking on our door saying, you know, this opportunity is here for you to take. I mean, we hear about opportunities here and there for people to take advantage of, but like you know, when you and I are having a discussion, you know, it's all about who you know and how you can gain access to where that opportunity is, which is you know the bad side of it. If it was thrown open and you get these opportunities based on merits, based on what you do, it would have been easier. But if you don't know one auntie who knows the government officials, it's a problem.
The problem about our country, they always need to know somebody. I want to just look at some of the comments that are coming through. My brother Andrew Oke, he's from Nigeria, but he's based on the other side of the Nordics part of the world. So when I saw him there a few years ago, I said, "What are you doing here? You are going to, your melanin is going to melt." But luckily he still has his melanin intact. He says the fact that it is your culture does not mean that it has to be cheap. I think we can appreciate that comment. And another comment from Tuso Motlana from South Africa says, for a while there's been a call for Africans to be proud of who we are. So what better way than to take your own culture and heritage and showcase it to the world? I appreciate those questions. We'll have a couple of questions, comments that have been made. We've got a couple of questions that have also come through. I'll just take a couple of them. And one is from Lulu Machika. Lulu says, how much does or did the choice to localize your value chain affect your rate of production? That's so interesting question because I'm sure you've all had decisions about where you produce, whether you can find the materials that you want to produce, that you want to that are going to be a component of your work in your country, or whether you need to export, or I mean rather whether you need to export production, or whether you need to import the materials. Laduma, I mean, you make most of the stuff in PE, so that hasn't been, has it affected you at all, or do you have other choices you would have made?
I still produce majority of my products in-house here in Johannesburg. and some of them are produced in Cape Town, some produced in Durban, and some produced in Lesotho. But the compromise that I take as an entrepreneur in terms of choice where I produce from is rather a compromise of a profit margin. So I do compromise a certain percentage of my profit margin. Had I chosen a cheaper territory to produce from, I would have made much higher profit margins, but it is a compromise on a brand as well. Like, for instance, when I started initially, I didn't want to have more supply in the market than the demand that was out there. And that's a number one rule of luxury. And when you produce from elsewhere, you can't even control the production or the IP. So for us, yes, it is very expensive to produce in South Africa. One of the factors is that our labor laws is very strict in South Africa. So with the minimum wage and the working conditions that workers have to work in, those create like a lot of overheads. Like for instance, right now I'm standing on 75 employees, and if I take my production elsewhere, I'd have to retrench majority of them and focus on the profits and the sales.
That's such, I mean, it's obviously a patriotic decision that you've had to make. Moses, how has this affected you? Have you had to make choices? Moses?
Yes.
What choices have you had to make in terms of sourcing and production? In terms of and how has this affected your productivity or your production?
Yes. I think we, as the brand, we are really rooting for slow fashion, if I can call it, because our production is kind of limited, and then we prefer in our brand values is that we produce everything in Rwanda, though we still outsource, like as I said, as referring to the fabric materials that we outsource, but then we have a goal to outsource by 2025 everything in Africa. So we still outsource the fabrics in African countries like Senegal and Egypt and India for the some of the fabrics, but the manufacturing, assembling, everything is done in our atelier in Kigali, and this is the thing. This is the structure that we have to stick to, because it speaks much also about the artisan work and the culture of having everything made in Rwanda or assembled in Rwanda. And then in the future to aim to have also everything that we outsource in terms of materials and fabrics also in Africa. So it's not like we didn't have a choice, but also we stick to the brand identity and the strategy that we building as telling our story of our pieces.
Tunde, I've obviously seen your product. I've seen all three of your production places around the continent, and I know it's craftsmanship is very important to you. How has this affected you? Having to produce everything locally in Nigeria, or and not necessarily as in whether I've got a view on it yet, but it's just to try to understand your philosophy in terms of why it's so important for you to produce where you are, and then the sourcing of the fabrics. I know you go all the way to the north to make the fabrics, but you bring in some of the components.
Yeah, it's really important for us to produce in Nigeria because first off, we're very artisanal. Secondly, I'll give you an example. COVID made me realize how important what we do is. And the reason is because, because the weavers who make the fabric, because the fabric is like the core of our product. And the weavers who make the fabric, if we don't give them jobs to do, they probably get jobs from other places here and there for people who want to get married or people who have, important ceremonies to do. And I realized that with COVID, they didn't get any other job. Nobody was having parties, nobody was giving them anything to do, and they became very idle. And that was like a wake-up call to me that what we're doing is really important. Because that means if tomorrow people decide that they're not wearing this fabric anymore for ceremonial purposes, then they would have to fall back on us to, bring the jobs. But again, it's really important for us to produce here because one, we want to keep the jobs here. Like Laduma said, if we decide to go produce maybe in China or somewhere, it probably will be cheaper. And I, for one, will have less headache because all I need to do is create the design, send it to them, have them produce it, ship it back to me, and I can sit down in my house and sell. Just find a distribution or distribution chain and just send them out to sell. But it's really important for us to produce here also because we need to develop the skills. We need to develop the manufacturing industry in Nigeria because it's dying as far as I'm concerned. It's really difficult to find a good shoemaker or a cobbler who can sit down and actually craft professionally. And that's becoming a problem. But if we produce here, we're able to have some sort of an internship program where we also train young people and bring them up. And that way, for us as well, the brand is able to grow and we're able to sustain the brand, sustain the artisanal art, and also sustain the production of the fabric, which is the most important thing for us.
Thank you, Tunde. So the last few questions, I'll just ask one. I won't ask all of you the same question, just one question to each one. And perhaps as I've seen has been quite prominent in your brother arsenal before. I'll start with Laduma as a wrap-up. Laduma, you've showcased at New York Fashion Week. Your work is available in boutiques in London, in New York, in many other places. How important what approach have you taken from marketing? Which just wrap it up in a minute or so. How important, what approach have you taken from taking the brand out to the world from a marketing perspective? And how important has it been?
Sorry, Mr. T, you froze a bit. Can you repeat the question?
I'll say that your work is available in London, it's available in New York, in some of the finest boutiques. Obviously, it's known, it's worn by some of the most well-known celebrities. What are some of the 2 or 3 things that you've done from marketing globally to take your brand out to the world?
First of all, personally, I've boycotted the idea of commissioning PR agencies to make you aspirational or tell your story. I've always believed that telling my story myself will be more legit and authentic. And I've done that well through responsive invites that I've gotten from around the world, from conferences and schools that I went to speak at, and from magazine features that I got. But for me, the people on the other side received what I do as a more from my voice and not someone else telling the story. And some of the avenues that I've taken to market my brand was to use digital tools such as social media, website, and Google and other platforms to make sure that people can find us easy and people can read about it easily or share our story with another person easily. So those are the 2 marketing avenues that I've always pushed on, and also maintaining communication with relationships that I already have with public figures or museums. There are museums that have approached me to collect our pieces or exhibited them or just buy them as part of their collection. That has kept us being spoken about, and there's a marketing rule that says that you constantly have to remind people about what you do and not assume that they know. So every season and every year and every week, we remind people what we do, because people easily forget. We live in a saturated digital world. Next thing you wake up, there's other people that are doing things that, of course, are not in your industry, but they will shift focus. So we had to be present in the movie space. We have to be present in music videos and in adverts, and our politicians, where they are fighting in parliament, Maxhosa pieces there as well. You know, so those are the industries that we've tried to push the envelope in.
So we have to be present, and present you have been everywhere. I think the biggest presence this year is going to be that movie when it comes out on the 5th, and we're looking forward to that movie featuring a lot of your probably finest pieces. The last question, second last question goes to Moses. Moses, 2019, I think the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement was signed in Rwanda by African presidents led by Your Excellency Paul Kagame. And the objective there was really about driving intra-Africa trade, which is very low right now at 18%, with the goal of 50% by 2030. How is this going to help a brand like yours and other brands in the continent, and how you see perhaps other brands as well around the continent? How is that going to help them for growth and for exposure? Or do you think it's not going to help at all? Do you think it's going to open you up for what, exploitation, for other people copying your ideas? I don't know. How do you see this? What's going to happen?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a great opportunity for local producers to be able to take this space and own it and produce, because as I mentioned through the campaign, that's where there have been policies that kind of to sustain what is being locally produced. So it was in that aim that they banned like the second-hand clothing. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to be able to sell what we are creating, because I would say creating is one, or creating fashion, but who wears it? And then I think this is contributing a lot to our selling and our incomes, in terms of if the second-hand clothes are banned, we have to provide options. So if people of Rwanda looking for options how to still dress well, not in a Nord or Western brand, how are we able to occupy that space to provide what Rwandans can wear? It's an opportunity for the brand, but for Moshions, especially in the clothing sector, and also other brands that are manufacturing locally. And I think it has been a huge encouragement, because since that, the fashion industry or the production industry been revamping and evolving so much. So it was a huge encouragement for the local people to start thinking creatively, and also how they can create jobs out of this opportunity. So there's a lot of jobs that have been created by locals and for locals as well. So it's a huge injection and indirect injection for the Rwandan South economy, and for the brands and everyone who's producing manufacturing locally.
It's obviously going to open up the market as well for you to be able to export your brands to other parts of the continent.
Yes.
People
yes.
to travel. But like you say, and also take the Rwandan brand across the market. Last comment from Tunde. I was going to say a minute, but I'm speaking to a Nigerian now. A minute maybe stretched. How is, with COVID-19, we pretty much had to learn how to rely on technology a whole lot more. How has this helped or impacted your ability to market, to sell your brand? Has it been a hindrance? Or do you miss the days pre-COVID, or have you got an absolutely new avenue now to take your brand to the world?
Well, with our brand, we've always it's always been very much digital. So it wasn't some sort of a shock to us. It was just we're continuing what we are already doing, but knowing that that's the future, and we need to concentrate a little bit more and take more advantage of the digital space, leveraging technology and all. COVID was just some sort of an eye-opener saying, oh, you're on the right path, just continue, basically. The only difference is the fact that we are unable to now have trade shows, where people can actually come and feel the brand, because that really helped at pre-COVID. That really helped because trade shows gave people the opportunity to actually interact with the brand, get to meet the founders of the brand, feel the product, learn about the product, see the product without, because some people still live, I wouldn't say still live, in a cave, but they still have something against buying things online. So they always want to, see the product before they can make a purchase, which is okay. And that's one of the reasons why we had to, really work ourselves hard to make sure that we open our first store this year, which we did in January, for people to come in. But ordinarily, we rely on technology to push our brand. We rely on technology to do our marketing, and like Laduma said, we use technology to get our story out, to the world, because that's the only way you can sit down here in Nigeria and you're talking to someone in Australia, showing them what you do. So why not technology? Basically, and that gives a wider reach, basically.
With that, I really want to thank you, Tunde out of Nigeria, the founder of Ethnik. I want to thank you so much, Laduma, the founder of Maxhosa in South Africa, Moses, the founder of Moshions out of Rwanda. Today is the continuation, I don't want to say the beginning, the continuation of a conversation we should always be having, and a mirror we should be holding to ourselves in terms of how well we are representing our continent and how we're telling our story, and most importantly, how we're owning our story. And I feel that culture, and by us integrating it into our creativity, is really about us telling our own story and owning our story. I think it's what Chinua Achebe said. If the lion does not tell it, until the lion learns how to tell its story, in terms of the hunter will always be glorified. Michelle O'Hara's note here, a comment, and I think this comment really speaks. I sent a comment to Laduma, but I think it's a comment that really speaks to everybody. That your authenticity is an example that all brands can learn from. She speaks about the importance of relevance and humility, which are integral to your story. I felt like you're speaking to all of you, because that's how I felt today. I felt that you brought your passion, you brought your authenticity, you brought your humility, but most importantly, you are flying the African flag. Until the next time, my name is Thebe Ikalafeng. I'm the founder of Africa Brand Leadership Academy, and here we are looking to sharpen the minds of the people that build the brands, that build the continent. Until next time, have a lovely one. Thank you, guys.